Good morning. Good morning, good morning. Kind of getting things set up here a little bit. If you are on, let's pop in. Let us know you're there. Hi, Margaret. I'll get to that in just a little bit, Margaret. Hi, Sonia. Wait for a few more people to pop in, and then we'll get to some of those questions and talk about a couple of things we need to. Good morning, Sue. Good morning, Arda. All right. Got some West Coasters here. Good. Hi, Mary, Patricia. I've got some pictures to show you today. Hi, Laverne. To share with you that people have sent to me, or they have uploaded in other places where I am figuring out how to get them onto our onto an Instagram page. Dee Saturday Sampler. I have the hashtag right there on the left side of my computer. It might be on your right side. I don't know how it shows back and forth. But you can, if you want to go to Instagram and put your photo on your Instagram page, hashtag Dee Saturday Sampler, and it'll pop up on that page. We're working on how to upload your pictures to the Quilt Show Instagram page. You can upload your pictures to the forum, and that is going on to thequiltshow.com. directly to to the Learn section. Go find Dee Saturday Sampler, and then you can upload there. I don't know if there's a link that Kristen can add to the screen or anything for that to make it a little bit easier for you this morning. I've got some pictures to share with you, though. People have sent in some stuff. The first one that I'll share with you is from Linda, and so she has gotten those 3 blocks together, and it looks like she's doing a black background, which really makes that fabric stand out quite a bit. So well done on that. And with each of these blocks, it's fun to see how you're getting your contrast and all of that in. This one is from Sharon. And so she is working with her own fabrics, so different backgrounds and stuff. And it looks like she's already starting to think about how she's going to put it into a pattern-wise, connecting the strips there. So kind of fun. You guys are doing good. And then I have Casey here finished hers already. She didn't create her own design, but she followed the design that Kristen had designed and put up on the website, and it looks absolutely beautiful. And great job. So she took this to heart and went to town on that. So thank you for sending that one. And that was from Casey. And then here is Carol, sent hers in. So she's going right to town too. Look at those, doing great on the curves and stuff. Again, using her own fabrics for this. And let me see if I've got, here is another Linda. So again, the vibrancy of color and the backgrounds on that. So look, you guys doing great. Very impressed with the work and what you're doing with this. And, oh no, that's just the original block. All right. So thank you for sending in these pictures and sharing your thoughts and questions and concerns with me. I've tried to answer everything that I can with email and a couple of phone calls, and so hopefully we're getting that taken care of. And then I want to address some things that have come up frequently today as we work through some of these programs. One question is the curved piecing. They want a little bit more effort and work and time on the curved piecing, so we're going to do that today. I'm going to finish off on block 2. I'm making another one for my own purpose, so I just stopped a little bit early, and we're going to talk about that, and then how to get started again. And the measuring seems to also be one of those questions. So we're going to go back, and I'm going to kind of do a little bit of review today. Hopefully that's great. And please, as you have questions, put them into the chat box. And right now, I think I'm going to go back and just double check to make sure that okay, there is a link for the forum. So please, if you are looking for that link, make a copy of that so that you have it. And I don't see any. I just saw the first question about where to upload and how to do that. And of course, I have left my email address there. And some of those pictures that I showed you today were sent to me by email. So those I can show on the show. But if you have an Instagram account, you can hashtag Dee Saturday Sampler. So with that out of the way, I'm going to drop you down to the table, and we're going to go back to the pattern itself. Today we're looking at pattern number 3. Partly pattern number 2. So we're kind of going back through those because I created the pattern so that, the things that can be the most difficult were covered with the New York Beauty. And one of those is these very long, skinny spikes and fat in between as we get to the corner of a block. Because that's where we kind of keep coming up short a little bit in terms of, our fabric. If we're going to make a mistake, that's usually, it has a tendency to be in that area. Someone asked the question, actually a couple of people did, in terms of why am I, cutting the paper, pasting it together when you can just sew it. If you prefer to do half and half and then sew the center together, you certainly are welcome to do that. And it's just a little bit trickier. And so for me, it's easier to cut the pattern on block number 2. And let me grab it here. And in fact, it shows a seam line, and you can certainly put that in. You can also use this as a fold line and lay that on, on your fabric, fold it, and then cut it out once and open it so that as far as fabric is concerned, you have one solid piece. And that's basically what I did there. And I opened it up and put the pattern. That was what I did the first time. The second time, I just traced it with the freezer paper and did it this way. And somebody asked, why can't you just leave it on there and do it as you would paper piecing? Because of the curve. You really can't, and you need to make a template. You could use the Carol Doak foundation paper and either pin or glue it to your fabric as you cut it out. I just find by tracing it on to the freezer paper, I can iron it directly to the fabric. It's going to stay put, and I get a cleaner, just a more careful cutting out of it. And that's why I use the freezer paper. And so and the curves cannot be paper pieced really with that. So you do need to make those templates, I think. And so I've got my pattern here for this, and when I measure, let me just go through and share with you again, and I'm going to go with this long spike here. When I measure this long spike to see how it's going to play in there, I take it all the way and include my seam allowance at the top. I don't know if I can, let me pull that down. I've got my ruler at the top of the seam allowance. I run it down the longest length of my block. And so it's basically 8 1/4 inches long. With my seam allowance down here as well as up here. And then when I look at this, it's 1 1/4 wide. So I'm going to take that 1 1/4 and cut it 2 1/2 wide. And here, because it's 8 1/4, I'm going to cut it 9 1/4 in length. And sometimes I'll go ahead and do that extra, 9 1/2, whatever it is. Then another question came up, is that, or not a question, more of a comment, is that the fabric, when they had it done, even with cutting it that extra inch, because most books and stuff will say at least a 1/2 inch, and that gives you your seam allowance. And that's very careful sewing of that, and it does work. I just tend to go a little bit faster. So I'm going to go back to block number 2, where I was sewing my second one and putting that on there. And I keep dropping things on the floor. And I'm going to show you a couple of things. How do I know without being frustrated that it's not going to fit when I'm sewing it one more time? In terms of this block, I want to show you 2 things. One is this is leftover from this piece, and I also had, and I'm trying to find where that one went. Oh, it also fell on the floor. And this one was a leftover piece from the orange where I had cut it. So obviously the orange goes next, and when you pull this back, so this was an E fabric, and now we're going to the D fabric. What I often do to make sure that it's going to fit is I'll lay it directly 1/4 inch over the top, of it, and I can see that I am covered more than enough all the way up and down, that block D, which is kind of hidden back there a little bit under this one. So I could go ahead and sew that with quite a bit of confidence, because I have overlapped it that 1/4 inch. I have folded it over. Another thing you could do is put this on here, go back and bend up, your next piece that you're going to be, which is a point, and fold this back, and you could see with the paper that the fabric covers everything underneath of the paper. You could do it the other way too if that's easier for you to see. So there's a couple of different ways that you could do that. All right, I don't see a question there. So let's just go ahead and this was cut at an angle. I had enough left over that, because it was an angle, that I can simply put this here, and we can sew that to the next one. At my 1/4 inch. All right, now I can fold this back. I'll just set that. And now I've got my next piece. It covers, and then I can move that out of the way so I don't cut it. And then I'm, headed to where I'm going to be sewing next, using my very expensive tool of cardboard. And where I so I can just pull that paper back. My add a 1/4 ruler. So I've got that put on there. Add a 1/4. Alright, so now I'm back, and then I can go to E. And so if I want to see, will this one work, I can do exactly the same thing. I can lay that on there over a 1/4 inch of how I would put it onto that fabric. And does it cover all the way? And it pretty much does. So I can lay that at my angle that goes from here to here. I can flip that back and see, from that point to this point, it's pretty close on that. So I'm gonna, think about that a little bit more before I would actually, I can also take and put this over like this. And I can see that if I, did my 1/4 inch seam pretty much all the way across, it's going to be close, but I can do it. And so let's try, and we'll just go for it and see that it's doing its thing. And the other thing that I pay attention to here is, do I have, this is going to come down at this point at about a 1/4 inch, and so I put it there, and do I still have my point? And I would have my point at the end. It'll be a little bit close, but I would have my point. All right. And if I were to hold it up to the light, I can see through the light that I have my, and I don't think I can do it on camera, but I can see through my paper that I have covered, everything. This is a little bit, it's a little over 1/8 of an inch here. So this probably wasn't the best of choices, but it's going to work for me. It saves some fabric for those of you who may or may not be worried a little bit about fabric. So let's just go ahead and finish this one so that I can work again with you on the curve seam. And again, putting my card down, bending it back. On the next seam, I'm going to sew. Just breaking that paper there just a wee bit. And then my 1/4 inch ruler. And grab my next green one, putting it on there so that it, you know, and obviously that's more than enough. But again, if I desire, I can put that So if you have any questions right now, would be probably a good time to, you know, put them up there, because I'll check here in a second to see, you know, if there's any other questions about what I'm doing, how I measured, any of that. So, and I really sewed off of that. I did not sew on the line, which was goofy. So that's not going to work. So I'm going to put that aside because I don't want to sit here on camera and pick that apart. I totally missed the line on that. New glasses, and I have not adjusted quite well with them. So I'm always having to think about that. All right, so we'll go to this one. So on my original pattern, I write out, you know, what I need in terms of, you know, the size of the pattern and what I need to cut. And then I cut my piles of fabric. I lay them in the order that they go. And then I'll get started with that. So let's start. The very first one, when you turn your pattern over, and I have taped it together as I said before, my spikes are going to be this particular pattern, and the very first one I'll show you with, you know, I don't necessarily always use glue, but you know, for the very first one, it's not a bad idea. And I'll just put a couple of quick little spots of glue there, and I'm going to put the fabric face up, and you know, about a 1/4 inch over that line, and then I can take my my paper, because it's going to stay put. I cut into this at one point. Fold that back, and you know, it's pretty much a 1/4 of an inch already, and I probably wouldn't have had to trim that little bit off, but I just want to share with you what how we go about doing this each and every time. And the more you do it, you know, the better you get at it, for sure. And so I'm going to put my next piece on here at that 1/4 inch. You could again, you know, drop a little bit of glue if you desire. and you're gonna sew from the top. That's what I was doing wrong on the other one. I had a brain dysfunction in that last bit of sewing that I was doing with you. Every now and then that moves a little bit. I get it back straightened out. I didn't turn my paper over and sew from the top, and so I missed my seam line. And if you were all watching, I may see that in the chat box that I was sewing it wrong. And my apologies for that. I have good days. The other day I could not sew at all. So I just finally gave up and walked out of the sewing room. Came back the next day and life was good again. So, alright. So we're going to sew that. We're going to press. Sew that. We press that. And now, once you sew it, you get your my add a quarter. And then you put your next piece on. As you can see, I've been very, generous with my cutting, because then I can cut half, one piece, and then with the angle, I usually can get the second piece, and I use a little bit. And sew. You can watch and make sure that I'm sewing on the paper side. And let me stop here for just a minute, because I think something is, did I put my paper on correctly? Yes, I did. It was looking funny there for a minute. Now I'm nervous because I feel like I'm making mistakes. But what is it they say? Better safe than sorry. Get that thread out. And we'll start again. And I usually take a few stitches beyond, simply so that as I'm working with the paper, I'm, stitching, sewing, handling it, I'm, not tearing out the thread from the seam, and it's staying pretty much put in there. So, for me, that's, that's kind of important in that. And again, with the 1/4 inch ruler, they do make a long one, as well as this, as the short one that I have. But I find that the short one is, acceptable for me. So as you can see, these crazy long angles, where you have this really wide going down to the point, you can get in there and when you cut that extra, measure on the width, add that inch, and you're lining it up, you pretty much have exactly, what you need. And then again, I'm going to put this about an inch over on both sides and see that everything is covered, and it's more than covered, so I can use this other half on this angle for the paper, and then I have only cut the one piece, and because I'm angling it correctly for that, I can get, you know, two pieces out of one and use that as part of my, you know, cutting process. And especially with these you know, long points and angles, there, you know, half of it is divided. And I've got something. And I'm setting my machine on 2.0, and that's where I've been keeping it recently after I, you know, watched Alex talk about it. That 2.0 is, you know, is where she keeps hers, you know, now, and because the 2.5, which is where it automatically sets, is more for garment sewing. Oh, and I really ironed that badly. Pressed it. There we go. I pressed a wrinkle in it. Don't want to do that. All right. Let me go to the questions and just see if there is anything. Check and double check when paper piecing. I've picked out then taped. Yeah, you know, that picking out part is no fun, and I didn't want to do it on camera. Yeah, the dunce cap. Well, I'm sure you guys have seen the dunce cap on my head a lot. Are you going to show the set-in triangles at the edge? Yes, that comes with the last show. I never... Joyce. See, I agree. I've never seen anyone sew on the fabric side of the foundation paper piecing. Because no, most people don't, Joyce. That's, you know, the whole thing. So you don't have to learn new tricks. You don't have to sew on the back side, on the fabric side. And, you know, Knit Nurse, I appreciate you. Thank you for that. Why are you sewing on the fabric side? Because I had the dunce cap on. I was crazy. All of that. And so I'm so glad you guys noticed all that. So that's the big questions. And with those things. So what I want you to do, I really did want to show you. Do you think we have time to whip through the last of these so that I can show you that curved piecing one more time? If I don't mess up too much anymore. Try to zip through this. I don't have that. I'm getting my pieces. I moved them, and now I'm all confused. I was going to do this really fast, and you know what it does when you start to do that kind of stuff. I've been really proud of you guys, those of you who've just tackled that. A number of you have said you've never done paper piecing before and this was your first shot at it. I am so impressed with you guys working and, you know, accomplishing, you know, because these are not the easiest of blocks to do. There is much easier paper piecing than what we're doing here. This is kind of next level paper piecing. And so I've just been thoroughly impressed with, you know, you guys and what you've accomplished. For those of you who've written to me and said, I've never paper pieced before, this is my first time, here's my blocks, and you've shared, you know, these incredible blocks with me that you've accomplished and you've done. So well done for all of you. It's just quite impressive. And again, if you feel that you need to put glue on your paper, you know, go for it. Don't be afraid to do what you need to make this. And let me back that up. I get the right angle there. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put them up, and in just a second here, I will get to them and answer what I can for you. And again, oh, sorry about that. I apologize. On this one, again, you can hold it over just to make sure that that angle is going to cover everything you need it to cover as you're, putting your fabric on. Again, fold the paper back, whichever, you feel that works best for you on that. And then right now, just to save a little bit of time at the end, I am going to be sharing with you next week the freezer paper method. So the block that we make next week, block number 4, I think it is, we're going to do some freezer paper, the freezer paper method, because I know that a number of you have been wanting to learn that and know what that is. And so for next week, we'll be doing the freezer paper. And with the freezer paper, you can purchase freezer paper that will go through your printer. And, that's 8.5 by 11 size. So if you choose to do that, you can purchase that. I know the store has it. Or if you have a quilt store in town that might carry it. You would also have that as well at your disposal, and it helps if you put your fabrics right sides together. I don't think I've sewed a block together quite this fast in a while. So for next week, if you've got your designs working pretty well, you can make the, more blocks as to what you are hoping that your design will look like. And again, I'm flipping that over just to make sure it's going to be in there correctly. And I'm going to get all of my fabric in, keep my points. And I haven't been flipping the camera as well as I should. I guess that's why they call it live, and it's you get the mistakes, you get the crazy. All right, we're coming close. We're getting there. A couple more seams. So you can see that when I cut these angles, that I can use the other side. And so that's, that generosity that you're giving yourself when you're cutting, your fabric works great for all of that. I don't need that big of a piece, I don't think. I think I can get by right here. And then, those pieces that I've cut, I can, keep for, next block, or, as you know, I try to use leftover fabrics for you know, art quilts, other, you know, blocks. A lot of these scraps are big enough to, you know, cut, and they can become your leaders and enders, and you'll get, you know, a quilt with half square triangles, all kinds of things that you can use with some of this leftover fabric. All right, one more cut, one more seam. We'll turn this up, and then we'll do that curved seam one more time, as I promised several people that I'd go through that again. And so and my last, guess I don't have another half piece, so we'll do it this way. And I'll have that angle for that, you know, another piece. All right, thank you for your patience on that, so that I could go through, for those who've been asking the question, for the curved piecing. I appreciate that. And so let's trim off these edges with the paper. Long ruler. And I'm sure someone's going to say, you left your blade open laying right there. Yes, I did. I'm living dangerously. I tend try not to do that. And a smaller rotary cutter, obviously, would cut this much easier. But this one, you know, does okay. All right, then again with tearing my paper back, I'm not going to do a great job of that right now. I just want to get that edge so that we can, I'll go back and clean up some of this a little bit later. Right now, I want to get where I'm going to sew into my curved edge. And I've said before that you can use your water pen and put that along the seam line. I tend to rip or just take my seam ripper and go along the side. I'll just show that again real quick. And I do that along the side, and then that just folds up and goes out of there really quickly, and which is really nice. That's my preferred method, simply because I used it long before I figured out that the water worked, or somebody told me it did, and it just works really, really well for me, and so I do show that. All right. So I have the paper off where I need to do the curved seam. I'm going to find the center of my piece. And where is my background? Where did I lay it? There we go. All right, and I want to find the center of my centerpiece. And I'm going to pin those together, right sides together in the center. And, the more accurate you are with lining this up and getting these pins in. And another thing that was mentioned now that I'm doing it is that their pin would come out as they were turning it. I push it in twice, and that way that doesn't happen. It's those little things that you forget to talk about because they become so automatic with you that you don't really think about that you're doing it and why you're doing it. But I will just go in twice, and that way those first initial 3 pins stay put so much better when I do that. Now, leaving some of this paper in makes this a little bit stiffer and a little bit more awkward, but I think I can do it enough to share with you how this comes together. So if you have a pin problem with coming, out at the edges, you can double that. Now I've got the 3 pins in, and generally speaking, I would leave it that way. But just for the sake of those who appreciate more pins in the middle, it just makes it a little bit easier as you are sewing around to have another pin there to help guide that process. If you want to do that, you could also glue it. Some of you have mentioned that several times to me, and yes, you can glue that along, and that's what the people who have the acorn glue would definitely tell you to do, and is to glue it. Ricky Timms does not use any pins at all, and I have figured out how to do that, and I can actually do this without using any pins, simply because I have practiced enough not to pull my fabric, and just to let the machine's feed dogs do their work. And so if you can, I hope that you can see at least enough to understand that I am lining my fabric up. I'm not pulling it, and it's almost like a straight seam, as it comes down. And so, there's no pulling involved. You're letting, your fabric ease itself right in as it needs to, and it does just kind of fall into place. And so I'm lining up my seam lines, and once I get it under the machine at my 1/4 inch, it pretty much is a straight seam that I'm sewing. And the biggest trick, I think, for sewing curves is not to pull your fabric. Adjust it, get it in place, and then let your feed dogs do the work that they're meant to do. And it usually comes out where you don't have much of an issue with it at all. All right, so and then you come back, you'll press that in, and your piece is as it should be, and it's nice and rounded, and it comes out, and if you've measured it, you should have a complete 8-inch block. Let me just double check for questions. Doing a lock stitch at beginning and ending each seam. Yes, today I am. I tend to turn that off most of the time when I'm doing paper piecing, because I don't want that in case I have to take things out, but I don't think I did it today. I made some test blocks. I found some great pins for that. They are longer. Yeah, the Clover glass head longer pins, and that does keep it from the pins falling out. So Kristen put up a link for the acorn glue, and then I haven't watched it. Thanks for the tip, though. I'm always interested in seeing how others sew. Absolutely. You learn new things, and all I suggest is that you try some of these. And with Amy Paps, if you like minis, her work is amazing. Yes, it is. Absolutely. And I think Kristen put a link there. And she's got other links for different rotary cutters. And for tiny piecing, the 1/8 of an inch ruler, absolutely. When you get down to the and then a knit and nurse, great tips on getting the really, really small ones. And they are not going to be stocking anymore. The Tim Holtz bundles, they still have yardage, and I believe if you still want a fat quarter pack or a bundle, Fat Quarter Shop had them this past week. And Linda, you've asked, do you start and stop on the edge of the seam allowance on the paper? No, I go a little bit beyond the seam allowance, just so that if I do have stitches that loosen, I have it covered. All right, I think that was the questions that were there. And, thank you guys. I want to say truly, 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 thank you so much for, tolerating, my mistakes on camera. I say I can't walk and chew gum at the same time, and that's fairly true. And so when I'm talking, I'm, doing the cameras and all this stuff. It's not an excuse. I've been doing it certainly long enough. I should have this down. But I thank you for your patience, your tolerance, and all of your kind words in that. It means a great deal to me. Many of you have become like friends on this. So next week, bring your, have your next blocks printed off. And if you want to order those freezer paper sheets, they come in 8.5 by 11, and so they're ready to go, and you can run them through your printer, or you can trace your pattern onto the freezer paper, and that works great as well. A lot of the times I like to double the freezer paper because it's gotten so thin. When I trace it, then I'll just iron the second layer over and make that work too. But I want to share that with you next time for those of you who've wanted to know. And if you've got, send me your pictures. If you can't get them up, put them on the forum, please. And I'll try to get some of those over to the cameras here so we can all see your blocks. Just really impressed with you guys so much. And anyway, so we will do freezer paper, And then the last show will be talking about finishing your quilt, putting in those setting seams. If you're following Kristen's pattern, which is really a fun pattern, and I who knows where I get to, I may follow it too. So we'll see. Putting it on. And again, if you send your finished quilt a couple of weeks after the show, about 2 weeks, I think, into after the show is over, if you send your finished quilts, or at least the quilt top, we're going to choose a person who has demonstrated, their creativity and putting it all together and getting that done into a great prize. And then everyone who sends in pictures and stuff, we put in for, a prize for that. So, because we're just hoping that you'll just grab onto this and go for it. So, anyway, have a wonderful, wonderful day. Oh, Knit and Nurses, I just uploaded to forum and it says unapproved. I've had some issues with that. I will talk with Kristen and John this week and see if I can figure out and get that squared away for you. And have a great week, everybody. See you soon. Well, Saturday.